Strategic Affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
You are on Strat News Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. This evening on our program Gist, we are going to talk about what is the way forward for India-European Union relationship going forward in the coming years, and especially in the wake of the pandemic that has ravaged through Europe as well as India, and various fields in which the two sides are going to cooperate. With me on the gist today is a familiar face by now on Strat News Global. We will join her in a moment, but as I have said before, this is a program that we do live for our viewers, and it is called The Gist. So, as I said, a familiar face, Velina Chekarova, joining us from Vienna in Australia. She is the director of the Austrian Institute of European Studies. Also, a familiar face, as I said, on Strat News Global, someone who speaks her mind very bluntly and frankly. Welcome to this program, Velina.
Thank you for having me, and I'm really, really glad to touch upon such an important topic as relations between India and the European Union.
Indeed. In fact, this is one of the defining partnerships perhaps in this decade, given the fact that in May this year, just about a month ago, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and so many EU leaders were at a summit between India and the European Union, where they came up with a very ambitious agenda, talking about climate change, health security, cooperation, and of course, it is now being followed up by External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar, who is attending the G20 Foreign Ministers Summit in Italy as we speak. He's been meeting his counterparts bilaterally as well as in the main plenary session. So first up, Velina, I want to know from you, what do you think of the India-EU partnership and the potential it has to contribute to various aspects of the international relations?
Well, let me start with the title of our conversation, which is quite telling. It takes two for a tango, and this tango between India and the European Union will be highly interesting one, will be determined by geopolitics, geoeconomics, and also interests in shaping the future of multilateralism and the future participation in the share on global commons. And you named some of the topics, but let me start first with the core, which actually took place in May this year. There was an important summit between the European Union and India during the Portuguese presidency of the European Union, which of course was no coincidence, because if there is one country that has experience from previous ages with exploring this immense geo-economic space in the Indo-Pacific region, that is of course Portugal. And this was absolutely by all means a breakthrough in diplomatic terms, in political terms, and like I said, also in geoeconomic terms. The official relaunch of free trade agreement between the European Union and India was decided. The expectation is that negotiations will probably begin even by the end of this year, or if not, by the beginning of next year. And let me remind you that next year, France will be holding the presidency of the European Union. That means that France will definitely have also an Indo-Pacific agenda. The second important point is that this free trade agreement has much higher standing in the relations, in the trade relations of the European Union with third parties than the investment deal with China that was meanwhile put on hold. And that says a lot. That means on the one side, we are observing kind of a colder period in the relations, in the bilateral relations with China, and at the same time, a warming up of the relations with India. That, of course, is not coincidental. That's on purpose. And the idea is now the following. The European Union has realized we need to participate in the reconfiguration of the global supply chains towards the Indo-Pacific region, away from China following the COVID-19 pandemic. And this can be done, of course, together with India. Second, Europe has also realized we need to be a security actor in the Indo-Pacific region. The Indo-Pacific region, in our understanding, is going to be the main arena for global power competition. And that means it's going to witness the major shift in global power from the Atlantic towards the Pacific. And of course, India will have a central role to play. And then, of course, the geo-economic component, that is, of course, if we want to have stable, predictable, mutually beneficial interests, trade in terms of trade and economic relations, we need to institutionalize them. And that is why this decision on the relaunch of the free trade agreement was the absolutely right one. The timing was perfect. The signal towards competitors, because let me remind you also that the European Union described China in its strategic outlook paper from 2019, not just as an institutional partner, but also economic competitor and systemic rival. So in order to face this kind of systemic rivalry in the future, we need also like-minded partners, and there is no better partner for such tango than the one between the two world's largest democracies and economies in the world.
Absolutely. I think you've encapsulated the whole gamut of relationship in one go. But in the short run, I think health security, equitable access to vaccines, also PPE kits, and also research going forward could be one of the aspects of the relationship and the cooperation. But one viewer, and I'm going to take one question from there. You already partly answered this question. What should be India-EU strategy to tackle China, which China just doesn't go away from any discussion really. But I think you've already tackled this question. But just let me say this to Sai Prasad Vishwanathan, that China has forced many realignments across the globe. And as Velina has said to us before, and even today, that India is a natural partner because of its adherence to rule of law, democracy, and of course, multilateralism that India believes in. So let me come to a question that I wanted to ask you, Velina. Is multilateralism is kind of inherent to EU, given its history and given its cooperation? How would that help strengthen the cooperation in the Indo-Pacific? And would it be an advantage that India also believes in this? Because China wasn't really a believer, and therefore it couldn't be a sustainable partnership with EU and China. So what do you think will be an advantage for India and EU in this respect?
Well, let me begin with the observation that currently the global system has been witnessing a phase of bifurcation. So we are going in a kind of a systemic bipolarity once again. At the system, at the top level, we have one global power with global power projection capabilities, which is the United States, and then again we have a systemic competitor or rival, and that leads, of course, to bifurcation, which also erodes the multilateral structures. Meanwhile, we observe a lot of alternative multilateral structures initiated, launched, promoted by China, not just in Asia, but in the world. India is, in fact, a member of some of these initiatives, some of these multilateral formats, such as BRICS, or the so-called RIC format between Russia, India, and China, or even some of the financial institutions. And yet, of course, India is also striving for a third way, let's say that way, a third way, which would mean, and here there is a strong overlapping of the interests with Brussels and with the European powers, and that is that we don't want to get caught in this systemic rivalry. We don't want to take sides, so to say. And I think that European Union and India might merge forces and can actually cooperate to strengthen multilateralism in the way they actually see fitting. That means, of course, derived from the institutional heritage from the last 75 years, based on market economy, on democratic political order, on human rights and liberties, and try to actually push for their own side instead of having to choose between Washington and Beijing. By doing so, they can actually not only strengthen multilateralism, where India can play a stronger role at the level of international institutions with the help of the European Union, but also they can create a counterbalance to this kind of Chinese multilateralism with Chinese characteristics. So in that way, I think that they will be pushing very, very strongly for rules, for the so-called rules-based order. But once again, it will be up to them to also get involved in regional formats and constellations, and most of them will be concentrated once again in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, on the European side, there is already a realization. Some of the European powers have also initiated their guidelines or strategies on the Indo-Pacific. We understand that we need to get more involved in the Indo-Pacific. A larger share of our European trade passes through actually the global choke points connecting the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean. We need to contribute to the maritime security. And of course, the Indo-Pacific region is the main arena for actions on the Indian side. And here, once again, there will be, of course, the anticipation that tensions with Beijing, that means bilateral tensions between the two Asian giants, will increase. So India will be definitely on the search for reliable, predictable partners. Some of them will be to found in the Indo-Pacific region itself. This is, for instance, the example with the quadrilateral format. But the European Union is definitely this kind of solid alternative, because it can contribute in various ways, and you've named it. So it's not just about hard security, so-called hard security, but it's also about the soft issues. And once again, we saw from the last 1.5 years that these two countries have acted in a very similar way. Take the example with the vaccines. India donated vaccines to its direct neighbors, and the European Union donated vaccines to the international mechanism. So definitely there will be a lot of space for cooperation, not just based on the realpolitik, but also on the shared idea of how we want to shape the future of international relations.
Indeed. Before I let you go, I know you have another appointment, another important conference to attend. But there's one question which is up your street, because you do security and study security and write about it. Viewer Dinesh Kumar has asked, what could the EU and India do together to counter Chinese aggression, especially in case of Taiwan? I know it's not an easy thing to predict, but since you have commented on China and, of course, Indo-Pacific, maybe you want to answer this as the last question before I let you go.
Well, this will be, of course, the worst case scenario. A worst case scenario will be definitely and should be anticipated, should be actually dealt with and discussed in the European capitals the very same way as in New Delhi, that a kind of two-front, which I think is definitely worst case scenario for the West, if you have a kind of coordinated measures, coordinated actions in both Asia and Europe. Take the example of the Dragon Bear. So you have a kind of an attack. It doesn't have to be a direct military attack. I don't think that we are going to witness a direct military attack on Taiwan. But what we might witness is this sweeping, long-term oriented disruption of political process, social processes. So basically trying to undermine the stability, the political order, and of course the democratic standards of Taiwan. China is not in a hurry. So what we can do is, of course, to strengthen ties, to actually promote. On the one side, we can let the civil society do their job. We have a lot of excellent institutions and organizations. And on the other side, politicians can do their homework as well. They can actually initiate various dialogue formats, and actually can also initiate a sort of cooperation, be it under closed door in terms of exchange of information on all highly sensitive issues, or be it also overtly, where showing political support will actually help Taiwan also to expand its network. So this is, I think, definitely on the agenda, and it has to happen. Otherwise, like I said, we might end up with a situation where on the one side, Russia, which has also become very assertive, will be further pushing in the backyard in Eastern Europe, and parallel to it, China will be, of course, pushing towards its geopolitical agenda in South and Southeast Asia.
Absolutely. In fact, that is already, there's a report today in the FT about how the second wave of pandemic in Taiwan is giving an opportunity to the Chinese to try and create divisions in the Taiwanese society through disinformation, misinformation, through perception management. So that's a subject for discussion on another day. Thank you very much for joining at short notice and giving us the perspective about where should India and EU be heading. As you said, it takes two to tango, and certainly I think both sides are ready for the tango, which will be good for the benefit of the humanity as well as international order. Thank you very much once again, Velina. Always a pleasure to hear your views and have you on our program.
Thank you for having me. Big pleasure.
Thank you. Indeed, viewers, thank you for joining in large numbers. But before I go, I just want to alert you on a series that we are going to play out, broadcast in the next 2 days, starting Thursday on 1st of July. 100 years of the CCP. CCP at 100, what next? Will the Chinese Communist Party be able to continue to dominate the society and the statehood or the nation state of China as it has done in the past 100 years? What will the second century bring to the Chinese Communist Party is the question that we are asking to experts. Take a look at the series from 1st July, but here is a teaser for you.
As the Chinese Communist Party marks its 100th anniversary, noted China watchers take a look back at what the world's largest political party has achieved and the challenges it faces going forward.
Though by population statistics, it is still 1 out of every 14 Chinese men and women who are members of the party.
A party that came from 100 years ago. A machine, you might say, that rules 1/4 of humanity.
Everyday lives of all Chinese citizens.
Only on Strat News Global.